Welcome to the first lesson part of this bridging class, which is an introduction to the ancient world. Obviously, you have no text exercise books to work on these, so if you're working electronically, I would make a note of the title and the aim. If you're doing it on paper, I'll also write this down. And just as a quick little start, a bit of general, how much do you know? On the screen, you've got 6 images of significant or famous things from the ancient world. They're obviously all buildings or ruins. So just for each one, can you work out, do you know what they are, and 2, do you know where you would find these? So just pause this video briefly while you work that out. Maybe get someone to help you, see if you knew more than them. So pause this video briefly while you work that out before we get to the answers. So there are the answers on your screen. The first one is obviously the Colosseum, arguably one of the most famous buildings in the ancient world. Next to it is the Parthenon, which is a temple in Athens. Then the Great Pyramids at Giza, they're found in Egypt. A tricky one at the bottom, Persepolis, the palace of Darius the Great and Xerxes, that's in modern Iran. They were both Persian kings. Middle bottom row is the Pantheon, which is easily the best preserved of all 6. That's a huge temple to all the gods in Rome. And last but not least, just on the end, on the bottom, is part of the sanctuary at Delphi, which is in Greece. Delphi was where the oracles were supposedly able to communicate with the gods. So just a little silly starter there to see what you already knew. So, when we talk about the ancient world, the first thing we need to do is get an idea of when or where this ancient world was. So if you look on the screen in front of you, you will see a bit of an overview timeline. Now, the ancient world can be a bit messy and it breaks up into lots of different chunks. Obviously, almost all of what we will study comes before the year 0. And I've made an error already with that. So typically in what we would call BC. Now, one thing you may find, and this is a move within archaeology and ancient history, is replacing the words BC, before Christ, with BCE, which means before Common Era. This is just a way of kind of secularizing time or history and giving it less of a Judeo-Christian focus. So BC is also BCE, AD then becomes CE, Common Era. But if you look at the timeline in front of you, and you will need to either make your own copy of this or use this, so we see that the ancient world is spread up across different periods and different times. Now, we should point out this is all very kind of Mediterranean focused when we talk about the ancient world or the classical world. Yes, there were things happening across the world in other parts, for example, China or South America and southern parts of Africa. The problem is we do not have a lot of evidence for these. So when we talk about the ancient world, the classical world, we are primarily talking about the area around the Mediterranean and the Middle East. So we'll start with, if you look, there's ancient Egypt, which starts roughly about 4000 BC with the unification of the upper and lower Nile. Then we see a shift into kind of the Greek world with the Trojan Wars, the archaic Greek world. We see a rise of the Persians, and the Romans really don't start appearing until 750 BC, and it's really not until around about 300 BC that they start becoming a world power. So, your first task, if you look on your task sheet, which should look like this, if you want to use the timeline in the PowerPoint, that is fine. The PowerPoint's attached for your benefit. What I want you to do, create your own version of this timeline with these particular headings, or just copy this slide out of the timeline and add to it. And can you now add these various events to that timeline, just to give you an overview of what the ancient world is, when it is, and what's going on the time. A lot of these events we will keep coming back to in the course. Some keep cropping up more than others. But it's important to have this idea of when and where the ancient world was. So it's a straightforward chronology task. So pause this video while you do this. Can I ask that you do submit your finished timeline in whatever manner it is, whether you've hand drawn it, done it on PowerPoint, maybe painted it. Can you submit that as one of the pieces of work back onto the Google Classroom, please? So pause this video until you've completed that task. Now, arguably, one of the other key parts of studying the ancient world is this familiarity with mythology and the Greek and Roman gods and the deities who keep cropping up, if not only as a reference, but in an actual role in the ancient world. So we'll start with this pantheon of 12 Greek gods. Realistically, there are hundreds of Greek gods, and not to mention the demigods, people who are half gods, various muses and mythological and ephemeral beings. But let's start with the pantheon of 12, the 12 Olympians. These are the top Greek gods. As we've said before, they often have a role in this ancient world. They're always cropping up somewhere. They're always doing something, or people are referring to them. So it's important to know who these people are and who these gods are and what they do. Each of these gods has their own responsibilities. So, for example, Zeus is the king of the gods, but the lightning bringer. Ares is the god of war, and so on. They all have their own backstories, their own origin stories, their own personalities, and their own quirks. And one thing to mention about these Greek gods, or these ancient gods, they are not the nice, benevolent, modern gods of particularly monotheist religions. The Greek gods are a nasty, squabbling, petty, jealous, dysfunctional family, ultimately. They all love and hate each other equally. They're all jealous of each other. They're all rivals. And ultimately, as far as the gods are concerned, people, the world, they are their playthings. Best analogy for thinking about the gods is think of them as they're like kids picking the wings off flies. And unfortunately, we're the flies. So we do need to know who each of these people are. The other thing we should do as well is, as they crop up throughout, they do have Roman equivalents. So again, if you look at your task sheet, towards the bottom, here we go, I've started a chart for you. So what I want you to do, draw a chart, or again, add on to this one if you want to use the Word document version. Create a chart for the 12 gods. Down one side, just simply put the names of the various gods. They don't have to be in any particular order. This whole task can be done very quickly with a 10-minute Google search, or if you want to do a bit more, use books. So what's the name of the gods? What's their key role? Give me a fun fact, emphasis on fun, please. Fun fact about each one. These gods are incredibly interesting. They've all got crazy backstories. For example, one of them is born by being chopped out of Zeus's head. Another one is born out of his thigh. So there's going to be some interesting stuff. So give me a fun fact about them, and then simply, what is the name of their Roman equivalent? And again, once you've done that, can you submit that chart as part of your work? Can you submit that back to the Google Classroom? I don't mind if it's done as a Word document, as a spreadsheet. I don't mind if you take a picture of a hand-drawn chart. That's fine. So ultimately, what I'm looking for after this lesson would be a completed timeline submitted and a completed chart submitted. There we go. There's the instructions. This is on the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is simply added for your reference. And while we're on the topic of gods and mythology, don't want to upset anyone. Yes, Percy Jackson is very, very good, and Rick Riordan is a well-respected writer. But the problem with Percy Jackson is it has been sanitized quite significantly from the kind of mythology and the gods that we would need to record, we would need to look at. So, not saying bin off Percy Jackson completely, but don't use it as a gospel rendition of the gods. If what I would suggest before September, if you can get hold of Stephen Fry's Mythos, this is a really, really good, nice, easy to access retelling of Greek mythology, Greek gods, the backstories, who they are, and what they do. It's a really well written, easy introduction to the Greek gods. So this is one of my recommendations before September. Read Mythos. So until the next lesson, remember completed timeline, completed chart, and we'll see you next time.